Attention hospital HR in Canada. Are you in search of the perfect insurance solution for your part-time and casual employees? Look no further. Meet Healthcare Providers Group Insurance Plan, your go-to option for ensuring the well-being of your team.
With healthcare providers, also known as HCP, you're not just providing insurance, you're providing peace of mind. HCP's comprehensive coverage includes medical, dental, and vision benefits designed to keep your part-time employees happy and healthy. There's even a package that includes life, long-term disability, and accidental death, disease, and dismemberment coverage for those who already have other group health and dental coverage.
It's time to bridge the gap between full-time and part-time staff benefits. With Healthcare Providers Group Insurance Plan, you can level the playing field and show your commitment to all of your team members.
Join the community of over 145 hospital sites who have made the smart choice. Visit healthcareproviders.ca today to discover how HCP can help you support your team in a meaningful way.
Is this thing on?
I think they can hear us a bit better now. Do you think they are ready to change the status quo?
It's one thing to get them listening, but now let's get them to act.
You are now about to witness the strength of nursing knowledge.
Hi, and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered and unapologetic podcast which discusses health and healthcare. My name is Amie.
My name is Sarah.
And we are your hosts.
Don't forget to hit the subscribe button wherever you listen to podcasts, Google, Spotify, iTunes, or our YouTube page. Please rate and review us.
Make sure you get our book, The Wisdom of Nurses. There's no better gift than giving the wisdom of nurses to nurses during Nursing Week.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, a podcast about health and healthcare. My name is Sarah.
And my name is Amie.
And we are your podcast hosts. So today we have an amazing guest, and we're going to be talking about something really, really interesting. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dianne Martin, who has been a nurse since 1979. She graduated first as a registered practical nurse, and then in 1998, she graduated as a registered nurse with a diploma in nursing and is duly registered as both an RPN and an RN. Currently, she works as an RPN in the role of Chief Executive Officer of WeRPN, where she has been recognized for her work to build bridges of greater understanding and respect among the categories of nurses in Ontario. Diane has experience working in several Ontario hospitals, predominantly in the field of perinatal care. She has held several leadership positions, including professional practice coordinator in an Ontario hospital and senior policy analyst with the Nursing Policy and Innovation branch of the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care, formerly the Nursing Secretariat. In 2016, Diane received the Premier's Award, which recognizes college graduates whose achievements have made a difference in the province of Ontario. She is the daughter of a nurse, mother to a nurse, and holds all those who care for others in the highest regard. Thanks so much for joining us today, Diane.
Thanks so much for having me to this great podcast that I love to be shocked and surprised by all the time.
We always are trying to, stir the conversation and,
yes.
Really make people think. And I think this episode again, too, will make people think about things differently because we know there's some misconceptions. We want to break them all down today and have conversations so people can truly understand the power and wisdom of RPNs who are nurses. Because again, that was one of the things that we always want to say, like, we shouldn't really have this whole, we're saying these are nurses and these ones aren't nurses. Mm-hmm. We're all nurses. And I think that's always something I want people to recognize.
And I think that there can be a lot of division within nursing, and we really want to present as a united front. And I know that's something that you have spoken about as well, Diane. So I'm going to start off with a really silly question. This may seem silly to you, but it's actually a question we get a lot. We just want to know if you can talk about what a registered practical nurse is. It's something that we get asked a lot. And I think it's really important that we talk about from the beginning what is a registered practical nurse.
it's a question that I get all the time too, and have over the years sort of refined any length of answer, right down to an elevator size, to a sort of complex explanation of scope of practice. But what I would say to you is that, nursing itself is a profession. We have a unique role in healthcare, nursing in general. And we take the journey with the patient. That's what we do that sets us apart from other care providers, the 24-hour-a-day journey. We have a process we go through where we use a great deal of knowledge to assess people, to decide what they need, and to plan and do, and then evaluate. Is it better? Did I make a difference? And if not, what do I do next? That's really what nurses do. It takes a huge amount of knowledge to do that. So we're nurses. We're nurses just like RNs. We're nurses like nurse practitioners, but there's distinct differences in each role. That means that how we go about that profession is slightly different. Nurse practitioners are the easiest to understand the difference, I think, because, they can do diagnostics, they can prescribe and treat and those sorts of things. But when it comes to RNs and RPNs, it can be a little bit more gray because we overlap in our roles quite intentionally. Every once in a while, when someone says to me, I just wish there wasn't an overlap in the roles, I say, well, let's draw that out. Let's look at what an RPN, no overlap. Here's what an RPN would look like. Here's what an RN would look like. Here's all the skills an RN would have. Here's all the skills an RPN would have. But don't forget, if there's no overlap, the RN can't do any of those things, even if their patient needs it. And the RPN who has knowledge and can do something very effectively for a patient, the patient would be denied that. So really, the bottom line is that practical nurses have a different sort of number of tools in their toolkit. So when you look at an RPN, they're very valuable in terms of caring for people who are, sort of established on a trajectory of care. We are a little bit more sure of where that patient's going. And the RNs are more suited or have more tools in their toolkit to deal with people who are very complex and may change in a matter of minutes into something very different looking. I'm going to use obstetrics because we share that background.
Right.
In labor and delivery, a patient can change instantaneously from someone who is stable and going through a beautiful labor to someone who is hemorrhaging or someone whose baby is in distress. That can change instantly. That would be an example of what I would call an RN role. But when you get to postpartum and you get an RPN who takes one of those patients and helps them to become a family through learning how to feed your baby and helping everyone be comfortable and know what's normal for a baby, and just making sure that that mother is really sort of healing well from that journey she had to have that baby. There's some RPNs doing amazing work there and have just really made a difference in people's lives. So the way I put it is equal in importance to the system, but somewhat different roles.
Right. I think that's I'm glad that you brought out that story. It's such a powerful story in terms of just kind of actually showing what that looks like in real time. And I would even say even further, RPNs are skilled when it comes to postpartum as well, because they're the ones assessing and seeing that the patient is having a PPH post like after birth. So again, and I have to tell you, I worked with so many RPNs who had amazing critical judgment, amazing assessment skills. And sometimes you just, to be honest, you don't see a difference. You don't see the difference or this delineation of, oh, this person's an RN, this person's an RPN, because sometimes that knowledge, skill, and judgment is just there. And I think that, in nursing school and maybe even in some circles of nursing, which I would say that unfortunately this was my experience previous to actually working with RPNs, is there's this, I guess sometimes it's so painful to say this, but it's like there's that hierarchy again, right?
Yeah.
Where you're almost taught that it's like, well, they're in this position, they can only deal with stable patients, and that's it. And we know that it's like you said, it's an area of gray, and there's a lot of overlap. And I'm glad that, you know, through this conversation, I hope that other people can recognize that there's so much more, and that there is overlap, and that overlap is important. And as you outlined, as there are, you know, some differences, at the end of the day, we're all nurses and we're all doing amazing work.
I think if nurses are all assigned to the right type of patients, you shouldn't see a difference.
Right.
They're going to meet all the needs of their patient. And certainly, one of the questions I get often is, well, what if the patient's status changes?
Right.
RPNs are absolutely brilliant at saying, I need someone to come and look at this patient. Something's different. I'm going to ensure that I bring, well, what I call patients having the right to the collective wisdom of all the nurses on a unit.
Right.
There might be a new grad RN who hasn't seen a few things that the RPN has seen many times.
Right.
That any patient has the right to all of those minds being put together. And so, yeah, the critical thinking is there. Their education might lead them down a slightly different path, but
Right.
we're all nurses.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of the things I do want to talk a little bit about is the workforce. I think this is the question and the conversation that's happening all across Canada, you know, globally, in terms of nursing shortage and these types of things. So WeRPN completed a survey in May 2024, which shows some grim statistics, such as 48% saying that they're considering leaving the profession. Would you say this is the biggest challenge that RPNs are facing today, or are there some other challenges that we might not be aware of in relation to, you know, work and staffing related to RPNs?
You know, in the time that I have done this job, which is 18 years, by the way, the issue changes all the time. What is the
Right.
issue of today? I would have never have predicted that what our issue would be today back 18 years ago. 18 years ago, it was people treating RPNs like a necessary evil.
Right.
We only use them if we have to.
Right.
Right.
And saying things much worse. We've moved not entirely past that, but the movement in 18 years to a respect is remarkable.
Right.
And I think that's important. But today's issues are the heartbreak that all nurses are experiencing, the pressures in the system, the Bill 124 that restricted pay to 1% a year at the
Right.
same time that nurses were being asked to risk their lives, the lives of their families. You know, when a firefighter runs into a burning building, they're not going to kill their children.
Right.
But we don't have that luxury as nurses. We have to run into our version of a burning building and are really scared for our families. The increase in workload, and not just work, but stressful work,
Right.
took a massive, massive toll on nurses. And it's lasted far longer than any of us had thought it might. And I feel that leadership who are incredibly under pressure. I have a daughter who's a nurse, and I tell her all the time, listen, the worst job in the building is that frontline manager. But
Yeah.
In order to cope, those people in large numbers have backed away from running towards the problem. What I say sometimes is leaders need to be nurses again, where when our patient has a crisis, we run to that patient and we work with that patient until they're better.
Right.
I feel that leadership need every day to go into the organizations and run to the units that are short-staffed and nurses are crying and overworked and really struggling, and say, how can I help today? I'm here with you. I'm not leaving you. I think we have not had enough of that. But nurses tell us, we do a yearly survey, to find out how we're doing in terms of the lived experience of nurses. And nurses are telling us that they are not okay. There's been some slight improvements over the last year, and I wouldn't even call them improvements because it's still in a very terrible area, but it's a stabilization or a sort of an equalization. And that is not good enough. Nurses are obviously telling us that they're still looking to leave 48%, considering I can do this for a little while, but I don't think this is my lifetime profession. And that's a big change from when I started nursing. And my mom, who, of course, you were a nurse your whole life. Like, that was just the culture. And now big changes.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because I remember when I graduated nursing, it was unthinkable to think that you would even leave the profession. And we hear this every day from nurses. And I'm even hearing from nursing students and new grad nurses that they're thinking about leaving already, or they don't know how they're going to cope because of what they've heard from their colleagues. So, and I also think the other part is that we thought that with COVID-19 more or less being 5 years ago, that or I guess 4 years ago, that things would have stabilized sooner or even improved. So it sounds like we're still a long way from that, which is really unfortunate. But it sounds like we're taking action. We're trying to advocate. We're trying to move the needle in the right direction and really share the stories of struggle from the front line. So I think that, you're doing a really great job at that. And just along those lines, are there other misconceptions about RPNs or things that you would like the public to know about RPNs and the profession?
So I think one of the, if we are, and as a professional association for RPNs direct us to be very patient focused on their behalf. And if you look at the population of Ontario, the aging population, and then the population of nurses in this province, we know we don't have enough nurses. But we particularly do not have enough registered practical nurses. When you look at aging populations and the types of care that they need, not that RPNs solely take care of elderly, but they are a big part of that care, larger than the RN population. And I just checked the numbers. Every month, the College of Nurses puts out where we are this year compared to where we were this time last year. And we can see that practical nurses are 400 less than we were this time last year. RNs doing better, probably not good enough, but doing better at 6,000 more this year than they had this time last year. But RPNs are less at a time when the ratio between RNs and RPNs has to grow on the RPN side because of this huge group of baby boomers. World War II really set us up for disaster, just so you know. But I was born in the last couple of years of the baby boom, and to care for us through our elderly years, we need to really grow the population of RPNs. And of course, our numbers aren't going to be there to provide that care. We can't use our RPNs for all of the jobs in long-term care because we need them in critical care. We need them in all of those places where the roles are differentiated. So what I would say is when you have a patient who is needs complex nursing care of the type that RPNs provide, you're not going to get better care than you get from an RPN. But we've got to make sure that the numbers of nurses in this province match the types of care that are going to be needed going forward. And sometimes people think, well, let's just get lots of RNs, but that isn't going to work. We have to have people, if you think of patients as being very diverse, then matching nurses up to those people is going to require a diversity of nurses. And there's a whole bunch of patients who are suitable for practical nurses who will get the best care from those nurses.
Attention hospital employees and retirees in Canada. Picture this, a benefit plan designed for casual and part-time hospital employees and retirees who aren't covered by their hospital's group health plan. Introducing Healthcare Providers Group Insurance Plan, a friendly partner dedicated to your health and well-being.
With affordable plan premiums and an exceptional support team, Healthcare Providers, also known as HCP, is dedicated to helping you every step of the way. Enrolling is easy, and you'll have access to a wide range of health and basic dental benefits from day one.
Already have health and dental coverage through another group plan? HCP still has your back. For less than $32 a month, the Signature Package, which includes life, long-term disability, accidental death, disease, and dismemberment, provides valuable income protection and peace of mind for the unexpected.
So take charge of your healthcare and financial security today. Visit healthcareproviders.ca to learn more. So just to follow up to that question, so how do you see that happening, Diane? How do we encourage more nurses to become RPNs, or is there something more that needs to be done to kind of bring awareness to the fact that more RPNs are needed?
So my job every day is to let the government know how much RPNs are needed,
Right.
all the different places that they are highly effective, and how the numbers are very concerning. So the first thing that must happen is we need to stop pouring water into a pail with a hole in the bottom. So we need to solve the retention. We could bring in
Right.
thousands and we did bring in thousands and thousands of RPNs last year, but yet we ended up with less than last year. So
Wow.
we have to solve the retention problem. RPNs in our survey were really clear with us. They told us that number one issue, wages. Number two issue, workloads. And then rewarding career opportunities was another big one. So first of all, the wages in some sectors has been beginning to be solved. Hospitals have had arbitrated, nobody was giving it away willingly, but have had arbitrated awards for practical nurses that have been very good and are starting to move RPNs to where they should be in those places where they have a union. Long-term care is sort of in arbitration now and settling some things. Home care is sort of abysmal right now. I recently saw 2 ads for RPNs to work in home care for $22 an hour. Reputable employers, $22 an hour, they can make 36-ish in a hospital setting.
Right.
You know, that's an average of 28,000 a year less, $28,000 a year less.
Right.
And home care is the answer for a lot of our healthcare woes. And yet, how are you going to get any nurses there, especially when we're not having any increase in
Their salary.
Yeah.
yeah. And also, when it comes to workload, I don't think nurse to patient ratios is ideal. It's flawed. It's got some problems. It's well, those, I've got my 4 patients. They're all very well today. You've got 4 very sick ones. Sorry that that's your experience, but I can't take on 5 so that you can have 3 because that's against the law. So there's some flaws to it. But if we're not going to solve workload any other way, then we're going to have to go for nurse to patient ratios. I visited 2 hospitals in Australia who have nurse to patient ratios, and it's working very well. Of course, we've all heard about California, and it tends to work very well. I wish we didn't have to go there, but I absolutely think if we fail to take serious the problem of working shorthanded as nurses, then we need to make a law that makes it so
Yes.
that
Absolutely.
organizations need to ensure this. Nobody, like I said, I don't see the leaders running to the units that are
Right.
shorthanded and saying, "I'm here. I'm going to give me like who can I assess for you today? Who can I, I don't see that happening, or just sitting there and making sure everybody has everything they need, whatever. I don't see that happening. And so if we have to make a law, we have to make a law to ensure that nurses don't go home every day feeling like they failed at their job.
Right.
anyone who's listening, if you are not a nurse, can you imagine going home every day feeling that someone didn't get all the care they needed because of you, might have been hurt
Right.
because you feel that you didn't meet their needs through no fault of your own? I can't imagine what that feels like to go home every day like that.
Right. Yeah.
And then,
That's how they feel.
yes. And then finally, we advocate for a rewarding profession where if you want to specialize, and if you're an RPN and you want to specialize in like obstetrics, family, maternal child, you can do it within that role. But if you want to go on to school and get another credential for RN, totally retained in the profession, amazing. All of those choices, a bright future, like why would I go anywhere else? The opportunities in this profession are amazing. Then those are the three areas for retention that I think are incredibly important. And then all the marketing, opening seats in schools and that sort of thing that we bring people in, we're going to keep them too.
Right.
So it needs to go in that order.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of commonalities and, like we said, overlap between what RNs need and what RPNs need, and a lot of it is the same. And you actually took the next question I was going to ask you, which was really just what your thoughts are on RPN to RN bridging programs. Because on one end, I could see how you don't want to lose any more RPNs, but if they do bridge, they would be staying within nursing. So, what are your thoughts on bridging programs?
So I feel pretty strongly about this because someone in the government asked me or made a statement the other day at a meeting saying, well, I mean, I don't think we can just keep robbing PSWs to become RPNs and robbing the RPN group to become RNs.
Yeah.
And I've never heard anything so absurd in my whole life. People will have within them ambition.
Right.
And they will choose how to have that ambition play off. And thank goodness for them. But what we need those people to say, and I'm going to stay making a difference in people's lives. I'm going to grow. I'm going to have a career. I might get a PhD someday.
Why not?
I went through that for a little while in my head, just discarded it. 'Cause I have a master's degree, but that was enough for me. But I started out as an RPN back in the days when you could do your RPN at a high school and graduate grade 12 as an RPN, and have gradually gone through this education because I wanted to see what I was capable of, but I never wanted to leave the bedside, not once, except a period of time when I thought, okay, now I'm going to do a degree. Do I want to be a teacher or do I want to be an RN? And the NEI program, the Nursing Education Initiative, was relatively new through the government. I thought, oh, so you're going to pay for me to become an RN. Okay, I'm in. I'm going to do an RN. And so I think that it's absurd to think and you know what? It's a feminist issue. We would never suggest to a male profession, you just stay where you are.
Right.
We don't
Never.
want you. We would never do that. But because we're a female profession, people think, okay, they're PSWs. Let's just find a way to keep them in that box so that we don't have to worry about refilling that box or whatever. So the first step to all of that is to consider anyone who is a PSW, an RPN, an RN to NP, any of those steps as retained in the healthcare system.
Right.
That's a beautiful thing. Also, anybody who wants to stay in their category and expand their knowledge into specialized care, also jewel in our crown. But the feminist in me bristles every time I hear someone say, maybe we just can't, maybe all the RPNs are becoming RNs, and that's maybe not a good thing. It's a good thing.
Right. I agree. And I think, and WeRPN does have a bridging program, right?
So we have government paid support for bridging now, from PSW to RPN and from RPN to RN. And in the hopes that that will retain people in the profession, but also a social equity piece. If you are like I was when I did the last 2 degrees, I did a single mother of 3. with financial support, I'm able to get another a degree and really grow and contribute in a new way. So we have that funding from the government. We are unsure of whether or not it's continuing, and that's why
I see.
when someone says, well, we're taking people from one pot when that pot needs them too, and I think that this is a feminist issue, and I'm going to
Right.
fight for the rights of nurses to choose. We have 2 government programs that fund education, continuing education, and we have one that does bridging education.
Right.
And we think nurses who do either of those things are amazing.
I
And we think
agree.
the government support for that should continue to exist so it's accessible to everyone. And so we retain them. If I'm a PSW and I have ambition and nobody's going to support me, I could be a real estate agent. That's
Right.
not a bad job right now. So, or at least it wasn't a couple of years ago. So, we have to really fix our mindset on this.
Yeah, and this means that we need to lobby the provincial government, because again, this will increase the complexity of our workplace. And again, like you said, it's a feminist issue. We shouldn't be held back in any way. If we have ambition to move forward, then we should have those resources and supports. Like you said, it's socially responsible, and it's also something that is well to do, something that probably has been identified by women within this workforce and within the work field. So one of the questions I have for you, we kind of already touched on about, awareness and how we might improve working conditions for RPNs, but what about hopes and aspirations for RPNs? What would you like to see, or where would you like to see the profession of RPNs in the next 10 years? I know that's a big one.
So, no, it's actually a very timely question. We are currently getting ready to launch a big investigative process where we're going to spend the next year doing a project that looks at the practice of RPNs, the value of RPNs, and talk about exactly what we need in the next 10 years. So, we all have an idea that we're going to have to delineate better. We're going to need RNs in very critical care roles, but there's a lot of roles that RPNs can be doing, and that it needs to all be judged by the roles need to be developed by the knowledge that RPNs bring to the roles, to make sure that they're exactly with the right patients, and then the rest need to be RNs. We need to identify what that looks like in practice. And this project that we're doing, we've hired an a large outside agency to spend a year really investigating this. And we hope that the answers will be really clear. It's at the end of it, we are going to produce a plan for the next 10 years, areas
Right.
that we would wish the government to put their funding to ensure that the right ratios of nurses. I always want to add at this point, every single RPN that I know really feels like RNs are absolutely essential to us doing our job every day. We have to work in that team together. We need each other. We would never suggest that like you can just use RPNs everywhere. We don't believe that, but we do need to have better decision making about where that is, and that's what we're hoping to produce at the end of the year.
Wow, that's amazing.
That's great. I think that speaking the language of data, I think is really important, because numbers don't lie, right? So if we can gather the data and use it to show where RPNs are needed, I think that'll be definitely a move in the right direction. I think that, Diane, you've done so much to advocate for RPNs, and we really admire the work of WeRPN. And thank you so much for supporting us in our journey as well. I know you have interviewed us about the things that we've done, and now we turn the tables on you. So is there anything else that you want to share? Anything we didn't touch upon in this interview?
Yes. One of the things that I think we should all be advocating for is a return to the joy in nursing. The two of you are quite a bit younger than me, but and I don't know if you were part of this, but back in the day, I never had a day where I didn't want to go into work, because I'll tell you, we worked hard very, very hard. We made a difference in people's lives, but we loved each other so much and we had a good time. And I was thinking about this last night. I watched the rally with Kamala Harris and her new Tim Walz.
Waltz.
And yeah, and they have a hard job, probably the hardest job ahead of them. And yet the joy was there. That's what nursing used to look like. I watched that and thought, that is what I remember nursing being. And we have to find ways to bring that joy back to the workplace. It's the missing piece.
Right.
And who could blame nurses for not being able to see reason for joy after what they've been through? But one of the things I want to do is help them find reasons to feel that joy again in the workplace, because the relief that it brings. And because when you're at work, you're still living your life. You can't just live your life when you're home from work.
Right.
You got to live at work too. And it's got to be a really great experience. So I would say that's a real goal that we should all be working towards.
I think that's a reasonable goal. And I think that, I do remember the times where I did actually enjoy going into work, and really it was the patients that always kind of kept me going back, because it was a pleasure to work in labor and delivery. But I do know, like you said, it's challenging right now. And we kind of discussed all the various different complexities. And of course, I think most of it's bureaucracy and politics that make the work of being a nurse so stressful as it is. But I do believe, like you said, bringing that joy and infusing that joy back in can make us have such a rewarding profession and make us continuing to want to go back to serve our patients. So thank you for that. I do have one last question. It could be on the record or off the record. It's entirely up to you. But it just kind of came to me. So one of the things I was thinking about is we all are nurses. And I know that, for example, in Alberta, all of their nurses are in one union. Would that be something that would, make nurses stronger in Ontario?
So I think about this all the time. I'm so glad you asked this question. Also, professional association, so the issue comes in when I think eventually, yes, they should be together. But the issue comes in when one group is very dominant compared to a much smaller, less dominant group. I know for a fact that practical nurses would not have moved as far ahead as they have without their own separate organizations. When you are the union, for example, you can control the role, what people are allowed to do to some degree. And when you are a professional association, you can advocate to some degree. It's like me thinking, could I advocate for the PSWs? Not fairly. Not fairly. I have such a focus on this one group of people that I love so much. PSWs need someone equally strong advocating for them. So I think of a future where people are so dedicated to the profession itself that we can ensure the fairness. I don't know that we're there right now, but you ask a question that I puzzle over all the time, and
I know a lot of nurses are wondering as well. So I'm glad that you shared your perspective, and a perspective I had never thought of that way before. So thank you so much for that. If anybody wants to learn more about you or WeRPN, what's the best place for them to find you?
Well, sometimes the best place to find me is in a restaurant. You won't believe how many people would send the waiter over and say, "Can you ask if that's Dianne Martin?" So if you see me out and about, please come and tell me your story. So go to WeRPN.com, or best to go our social media. We of course have Twitter, which we don't use as much anymore. It's a bit changed, as y'all know. We have Facebook, which now is starting to fade away into Instagram, is now our most popular. You can find us on the Registered Practical Nurses Association of Ontario or WeRPN. It'll come up either way. And follow us. If you are not a member of your professional association, because it is a voluntary membership, you should know that the number of members directly impacts the ability to have a stronger voice. That project I talked about next year long, big consultants working on a year-long project, those sorts of things happen because people choose to be members. So for the sake of your profession, it's very important to belong. And, you know, any of those outlets. And of course, you can call me. People do. Just connect with me anytime you want. There's the good days where I get to talk to actual nurses.
Right.
And then there's the slightly harder days when I'm at Queen's Park trying to help people understand what it is you do and what you need.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for your dedication, your love of nursing, the wisdom that you bring to nursing. We're so happy that you were able to come and have this conversation with us on the Green Nurse podcast. And I'm sure we'll be doing and having more conversations, Diane, in the future, because we definitely want to follow up with your the project work that you'll be doing. And again, just thank you so much for coming on the Green Nurse podcast with us.
Oh, and thank you for, well, first of all, thank you for your podcast. How did someone leave an epidural needle in someone's back? I mean, the most fascinating thing I've come across in a long time, but thank you for having such a dedicated nurse podcast and for allowing me to be part of it.
Thank you
Thanks,
for
Diane.
being